Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We will be starting in just a moment. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure you're muted. Welcome to everyone who's just joining us.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. Welcome. This presentation will be recorded in case, so just so you're aware, if you would like to keep your camera on or turn it off, that is up to you. We're going to be starting in just a moment. It's just about 4 o'clock. We're just letting everyone in from the waiting room. Thank you again for joining us. We'll be starting in just a moment. We're just letting a few additional people in the room. And just a reminder, please make sure you're muted, just so that we don't have any background noise. Thank you so much for your understanding. And feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you just would like to let us know what you teach, where you're from. Just builds a sense of community during our webinars. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So I think we'll get started. It's just a minute after 4. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I know everyone is working very hard. We're having very long days at work. Most of us are, so I really appreciate you taking an hour after work today to spend with us. I'm Monica Baker. I'm the president of New York State TESOL. And it's an honor to be able to welcome our guest today. When I was lining up speakers for January, I said we were going to start with the stars of TESOL, the stars of TESOL from around the country and around the world. And we actually have someone joining us from Lima, Peru today. And our guest today is Dr. Aida Walqui, and she is the Director of National Research and Development Center to Improve Education for Secondary English Learners. She's the Director of Quality Teaching for English Learners with West Ed. And we so much appreciate her spending some time with us this afternoon. So Doctor, thank you so much for joining us for this presentation.
Hello, everybody. It's a pleasure seeing you all. And it is a very distinct pleasure to see my dear friend, Tony DeFazio there. It is an honor to be speaking to hard-working colleagues. Amazing that we could gather such an incredible crowd in times when distance learning really taxes everybody, right? And so I chose to speak, and now I am going to do clumsy things like share my screen. Okay, here we are. So the theme of my presentation deals with the development of expertise in order to offer our students who are learning English as an additional language quality opportunities to learn. And later on, I'm going to speak a little bit about this newly developed center that Wested has received, because you will find lots of resources for your work there. So the themes for this presentation include talking a little bit about what is teacher expertise and why is teacher expertise so important. So I want to offer an organizational device so that you understand what are the elements that go into building teacher expertise. Then I want to move rapidly into what a quality and equitable pedagogy for multilingual learners looks like. And I'll talk about 4 features, and then I am going to show 2 video clips to anchor in practice the ideas that I am presenting that build from both research and informed practice. And at the closing, I am going to talk about the work that the center is involved in and the resources that you can access through the center. So let us begin talking about expertise. We say that a professional has expertise when that professional knows a lot of things about the profession and has the right dispositions to be able to carry that knowledge through. So all of this is in teachers' heads, in teachers' hearts. But that is not expertise, because expertise adds the ability to translate all of this into practice that is situated in very concrete and specific contexts. So we say, for example, that an oncologist has expertise because he knows everything about cancer, because he wants to cure cancer patients, and because when he acts, either when he operates on patients or when he advises them, he does the right thing every day with a wide diversity of patients. And that is exactly what expertise is. Many times we have people who can talk the talk, but then at the moment of action, unfortunately, is a very pale version of the talk. And so I want you to understand what expertise is so that hopefully all of us begin to match much more closely our knowledge with our implementation. So I'm going to offer you now a model, which is a conceptual organizer of teacher expertise. And organizers, conceptual organizers, are really important because first they map the domains or the components that enter into, in this case, expertise, but very important because we can analyze our own behavior and say, where am I lacking? What do I need? And so having this conceptual organizer enables, for example, if you work in professional development or if you work in teacher education, it enables us to determine where different participants or teachers are placed at, and thus understand what areas need to develop and be promoted. So of course, the first domain is vision. And vision is a dispositional cluster of attributes that includes the goals, the hopes, the dreams that teachers have. So there is clarity about what excellent teaching looks like, and there is clarity and commitment to who our students can be. We see our students not for their pasts, but we see our students for who they are right now as they come to school and for who they will be thanks to the work that we engage them in. There is a second important domain that is the domain of motivation. And of course, motivation includes the reasons, the incentives, the emotions that we feel when we teach. Motivation and vision are not static. They are continuously changing as a result of the contexts in which we work. So every new teacher starts full of motivation. And in fact, I taught high school for 6 years, and I remember hearing others say, oh, she's the rookie. Just wait a couple of months. And I thought, what are they talking about? And what they were talking about, unfortunately, is the toxic environment that exists in some schools, where you come with motivation, but what happens to you every day in school erodes that motivation. In other words, what we need to worry about is to keep our motivation growing all the time. And so if we have toxic colleagues, let us stay away from them and let us focus on the things that matter. Ideally, if you are a principal, then you promote environments that really nourish the motivation of everybody. And actually, for teachers, study after study says so. The most impact on motivation comes from inviting teachers to work with others in preparing lessons, in comparing student work. So our motivation is derived from the successes and the preparation that we have to do it well. Then there is this domain of knowledge, which actually, and unfortunately, tends to be the domain that teacher preparation emphasizes the most. And that is knowledge of your subject matter. And sometimes it's English as new language plus history or mathematics or science, whatever that may be. It's knowledge of pedagogy, like value of wait time, what kinds of questions may we ask, how to engage students in collaboration. Knowledge of our students, which is never static either, because we are learning from our students every day. And knowledge of ourselves, because we learn so much teaching. And we learn from what we hear our students say, and we need to be able to admit we don't know everything, and we need to be able to laugh at our own little failures and promise that we'll do that better next time. The diagram is, if you imagine a diagram with four diamonds kind of around a circle. So the top diamond is vision. And then the left diamond is motivation, which I had just talked about. And the right diamond is knowledge. So these are the components of teacher expertise. And I was now working on the middle diamond. And the middle diamond is reflection. And it is reflection because as we reflect as teachers, then we make our vision grow, we become increasingly more motivated, and our knowledge is also enhanced. In other words, educators need to be reflective, because if they are not reflective, they don't grow. So a teacher may have vision, knowledge, reflection, motivation, and still they work in a context, which is something that surrounds the whole diagram. And sometimes that context, for example, during the time when we had high stakes accountability, that really, and testing and teaching to the test, that eroded not just motivation, but that eroded knowledge, because teachers only 10 years ago were asked to teach scripted lessons. And scripted lessons do not meet the needs of all students, right? And so there is an interrelationship among them all. Once again, a teacher may have vision, a teacher may be motivated, a teacher may be able to reflect, have knowledge, and understand her context. And yet, when teaching happens, as practice is enacted, practice fails to convey all of that knowledge and disposition. And that is why coaching, for example, is so important. That is why working with peers is so vital. So if with peers, we can plan lessons together, that then we go and teach and then come back and reflect on together, that is going to enhance our ability to translate practice. So let's go on to the next slide, Marian, which talks about educational equity and educational equality. There is sometimes a problem in understanding in people that equality is the same as equity. But equality means you treat everybody in exactly the same way, regardless of their needs, regardless of where they are. While equity means that we dream the same ambitious goals for absolutely everybody in class. And then we understand where different students are positioned in order to help them all in accelerated and non-diluted ways accomplish those goals. So if we act equitably, we are acting differently with different students or with different groups of students, because we are paying attention to their very specific developmental stages, and we are moving them all along towards the same goal, although perhaps taking slightly different tracks. Please go on to the next slide, which says pedagogical equity entails. So if we want to aim for pedagogical equity, which is of course what we want to aim for, then what we need to do is we need to value what students bring to the classroom. That is because that is going to mediate, that is going to intervene with the environment, and that is going to intervene with the curriculum. We need to believe, and this is very important, that development is a result of learning, not a prerequisite for learning. And think about it, in education, we have had decades of talking about developmental readiness. The child is not ready to learn that. And with our English learners, we have said they don't have enough English. They cannot be taught that concept. It's too complex. But in reality, any concept can be taught in intellectually honest ways to any student. And that's what we need to aim for. And we need to understand that it is a result of what we invite students to do and support them to do that pushes ahead their development. To do that too, the learning opportunities need to be enticing. They need to be intellectually honest. They need to be well supported. And for example, this is a problem we are having today nationwide. The dropout rate of students have increased dramatically. Why? Because the lessons that they get sometimes distally are lessons that are just very boring. They're worksheets. And students are saying, why should I get involved? Why should I come to this? We need to, and it's possible, because everything that our students need to learn is valuable, is worthwhile, and is very exciting and can be made immensely stimulating. We also need to accept that students have to grapple with uncertainty. You know, we think that students need to know exactly what they need to do and do it. But in reality, learning is much more ambiguous, and uncertainty and doubt are really important motivators for seeking further clarity. And so that is what we want to do. Doing all of this, next slide, please, Marion, there are some shifts that need to occur. And the first shift is that our curriculum tends to be a mile long and an inch deep, right? We have 25 different things to do in 1 week, topics. And so that needs to change for working on a theme deeply and rigorously over a certain period of time. And I'm going to give you an example of that. We need to move away from conceptualizing the goal of learning as mastery. Mastery means there's nothing more to learn on that topic. And truth is, mastery only at death, because we keep learning about things all the time. We keep enhancing our knowledge of some things. Of course, not everything, but so thinking about I'm teaching for mastery, or until the student masters this, he cannot move there. That is not the way human beings learn. That is not the way we develop languages either. In fact, just as a little aside that is totally related, we know, for example, that if you mainstream a student out of the English learner category, a little bit before they are ready according to standardized testing, studies, for example, Peggy Estrada's studies show that they end up doing way better than native speakers. But if we retain them because they haven't mastered by test standards what is needed for reclassification, then we really condemn them to being long-term English learners for a long time. Let's go to the next one, the next slide, Marion. We also need to make sure that everything we do has depth. And so I want to define this concept of academic depth. The first one is the essence of a theme is captured. So we don't teach all the complexities of a theme, but it's almost as if we had to do an X-ray of a theme and then grab those essential ideas and the interconnections, the way in which these ideas weave with other important related ones to form a good body of knowledge. And students need to apply analytic thinking as they explore the lesson. That makes a lesson coherent. So let's go to the next slide. And what I'm going to do is, I am now going to talk about the first characteristic of quality learning that is dictated by a teacher expertise. And that first one says that I am seeing mine at 500 and that's no good. I'll do 100. Okay, now I see that better. Learning mediation, sorry, the first one is mediation of what students take to the educational encounter with the environment and with the curriculum. One new term is becoming really important in the literature, and that is the concept of affordances. And so teachers have to create rich, meaningful environments for students so that students notice. And it is that perceiving of students that makes certain aspects relevant and that thus help them learn. So what you have here under one is learning is the continuous process of students noticing from the pedagogical environment and using what they notice. And that is the definition of affordances. Don't worry if it's not clear. I think when I show you the video clip, it will become clear. So an explorative activity that we invite students to engage in at the beginning of a lesson enables us to understand what's in their minds, what they know, And it's not only important to understand what they know, because we better know our students, but it is important to understand where we need to take them and what road to take to get there. And we need to act on the firm belief that while not all students will move at the same pace, in fact, I have over 100 of you joining us today, and each one of you is taking what I'm saying in slightly different ways, because you come with this much knowledge, this little knowledge, and you're filtering it through your experiences. And so there's no way all of you will get exactly the 100 points, imagining there were 100 points in the presentation. So why would our students? They learn differently, and they learn at different paces in spite of us providing the same affordances. The important thing to know is that they will all learn. So the important thing is to know that they are all growing, they are all developing. And typically what happens is that those who need to grow the most develop the fastest. So in the example that I am going to show you, and there is a photograph, so kindly show the photograph. You see here a group of students. Now these students have been bureaucratically labeled as long-term English learners. So they have all been English learners for more than 6 years. They are now in a high school. In fact, the high school is in New York City. It's Voyages Academy in the Bronx. And the students are working silently in an activity that the teacher calls the silent graffiti. And what the activity is it has a picture in the middle of a poster. You can see that, right? And it's a very controversial picture. And of course, it was much more controversial. Well, it's still horribly controversial, unfortunately. But when it just happened, the teacher did this 2 weeks after it happened, Colin Kaepernick taking a knee during the football game, right? With the 49ers. And so she brings it and gives each group a different poster with the picture and says, you have different color markers. Each of you is going to take a color marker and you're going to look at the picture, and silently you are going to write your reaction to the picture. You can write your reaction or you can write questions. And she gives them 2 minutes to do that. And then, and this is where students are right now, she asks them to turn around the poster and read a couple of their peers' comments, and then either respond to the peers' comments or ask their peers questions. But notice that there is accountability, because the teacher asks students to sign their names with their color marker. Because we all know that if you don't institute a little bit of accountability, kids may say crazy things, right? And you don't want that. You don't want to deteriorate the environment that is so important for good learning to take place. So if we go to the next slide, you will see what happened, what came out from one group. And so you see the color green, the color red, the color blue, the color black, and some reactions, and then reactions to reactions, and you see the signatures of the students. Now, this is the very beginning of 1 week of exploration of protest, social change. So this is just the beginning, but the beginning of the lesson is A, stimulating, B, taps into what students bring in terms of concerns, issues. It was in all the papers, it was in all the news, right? So they were all talking about Cap and what he did, and how horrible, how great, how wonderful, how bad, whatever they were talking about. And then the issue of social justice and protest in sports is going to continue. And in fact, the main text in this lesson is a text that deals with the famous protest back in 1968 of the two Black runners at the Olympic Games in Mexico City, right? So you see how a keen focus on protest and change is maintained in the lesson through 5 days. But students, A, begin where they are, B, they really are provided the supports, they, their opportunities to learn are exciting, and it's almost impossible to say no. And they are being quiet so far. So they'll have 5 minutes in which they're quiet, they cannot talk. Why? Because the teacher is now having thought about it, having formulated thoughts. She's going to ask them to share their thoughts. And that's what we're going to watch now. So Marian, kindly show us the first video clip.
Brutality in the cities and inequality and unjust actions, and like basically everywhere that I see it says something about that. So
a common thread that I noticed was everyone was able to notice that it was metaphorically a form of disrespect to the government, because everybody's standing and obviously saying the pledge and have their hands to their heart, but the people actually protesting are kneeling down and putting a stop to what's going on.
It also shows that, you know, as a unit, we're stronger. As you can see, there's 3 people that are kneeling down, and 3 people kneeling down looks better than just one person.
A common thread that I see is that we do all believe that it's acceptable for them to be taking a knee because it's for social injustice, and they're trying to stand up for what they feel is wrong going on.
A common thread that I saw was a form of them not non-violent protest involving racism and police brutality throughout the cities. And yeah,
I like that.
So you hear these students, and it is a shame they're still labeled English learners, right? The little girl from Namibia says, taking the knee is a metaphorical form of showing disrespect for the government that abuses them. I mean, that is spectacular. How can we condemn a child to stay in the label English learners when they have such brilliant way of thinking? However, the only way of discovering that they do think in brilliant ways is if we let them talk. And if we create the structures so that they talk. First, we prepare them so that during the silent graffiti, they can really brainstorm their thinking, right? Get it ready to share. And B, now during this sharing, the teacher does a round robin. So she says, each of you is going to express what common themes you saw running through the different posters, because they look at the posters that come from the classroom. So you see, it's really important to have that feature. Shall we go to the next slide, please, Marian? The next one says that development is a result of, not a prerequisite for learning. And so this we need to believe, because unfortunately, as I say, developmental sequences are way too ingrained in American educators' minds. And that students at the same time learn conceptual, analytical, that is the processes that they run those concepts through. Are they analyzing? Are they critiquing? Are they comparing? Are they contrasting? What are they doing? And language at the same time. So there is an inextricable unity in the development of them all. And that's why when we teach language on its own, or when we have a dual objective, the language objective, the conceptual objective, things don't work and they condemn our students. So in equitable lessons, language is amplified. It is not simplified. And we include communication through visuals. Pictures are important. Videos. The teacher is going to show them next the video of the '68 Olympics. Reading all kinds of texts, all of that works. Let's go on to number 3. And number 3 says, enticing, worthwhile, and well-scaffolded opportunities to learn are offered to students so that they are always working at, this is a phrase that comes from Jerome Bruner, at the edge of their competence. So they're always moving into areas where they have not ventured, but they need to now as they apprentice into new ways of using English. And it requires support so that if you notice students making an error, you don't correct them there because then you interrupt them. But you take down a note and later on, you offer them opportunities to themselves understand where the errors are. And if not, then you give it to them directly. So you saw that all students in the class where students have been labeled as long-term get at the same understanding, basic understanding, although they all work at different levels of expertise. Now, you could say this is easily done in a class where students basically are native speakers of English, almost, right? Since they have been in the States for so long. But what happens in a class of newcomers? So I would like to next show you a class of absolute newcomers. The kids you're going to see are kids who have been in the States 6 weeks or less. The teacher you're going to see is a teacher that teaches the language arts curriculum for 9th grade. His name is Robert Thompson. And still, he is also beginning a lesson. And he's going to begin a lesson on what happens when 2 different cultures represented by 2 different young people encounter themselves. And so let's watch the video and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so you see here how students who have been 6 weeks in the in English actually can do so well. Now, 6 weeks, people are horrified. And when I show this video to teachers, they say, they haven't been here 6 weeks. But if you do the math and you take 6 hours a day times 5 times 6, you get 1,080 hours. Couldn't we do that? Shouldn't we get our students to do that after 1,070 hours? In fact, what is a crime is that we have students whom we call long-term English learners as if that was a characteristic of their own and not a result of our own limitations. And that is what we want to change by building our own expertise. In the class we just saw, students, I mean, are really, they feel intellectually engaged and they are grappling with uncertainty, right? I mean, they laugh themselves at what they say because they know it's not true. It's not that we cannot become friends if I like something and you don't, but so they have to laugh about it. But that's what they can say at the moment. And it's valid and it's valuable. And so they are aware that their capability doesn't reach the sophistication of ideas that they have. For those of you who have learned other languages, you know how that feels. I remember being in the States hundreds of years ago, and in fact, feeling totally inadequate. I thought I am an intelligent young woman, but my English makes me sound like very, very, very simple and I'm not simple. So communication is meaningful, and it is through communication that students develop their practices, and it is evident because of the essays they will write in this class and because of other things they have done. Now, how do you make classes engaging in a distance environment? We have just developed 2 briefs, and they are in our website. One is directed to teachers and one is directed to educational leaders, so that there are some guidelines as to how to make them exciting. Next slide, please, Marian. You can visit our website, and there is the address there. It's a rather simple address, but as we said, we will send you the PowerPoint. In fact, allow me to speak for a couple of minutes before taking a few questions about the website. Next page, next slide, please. Our center is focused on 4 key studies, and it's focused on secondary English learners because, as you know, nationally, over 1/3 of English learners are in secondary schools, and more than 2/3 of them were students that started their education in America in kindergarten or 1st grade. So that means we have a national tragedy. Students who have been here 9 years, 10 years, and they're still trapped in the category. And that is why IES, the Institute of Educational Sciences, has decided to fund our center to study what we can do in order to change that terrible situation. So study 1 looks at how students in 4 states, the patterns, the sequence of courses they take to understand where the barriers exist. Study 2 studies the system of co-teaching nationwide, and how much money is invested into putting 2 teachers in classes without giving them the adequate time to plan together and to do things. So we're going to look at where co-teaching works well, where it doesn't, what to do more of, what not to do. Studies 3 and 4 develop and test over 5 years educative materials in English language arts and mathematics. And educative means that these are materials that develop the expertise of students, but also of teachers, because they are annotated so that as teachers prepare to enact them, they learn the choices, the purposes, the reasons, and what they may do, A, B, or C plan, depending on what's going on in their classes. These materials will be available, unfortunately, only during year 5, and we are just in year 1. And we are doing a supplemental study on how to measure student learning to inform next learning, not as standardized testing does to measure students' pasts. So the next slide, please. What you can find in our center website if you visit it. As I said, there are 2 briefs on how to make distance learning quality learning. There are 12 one-hour conversations with national and international leaders, fabulous conversations. Diane Larson-Freeman, Guadalupe Valdez, Kenji Hakuta, I mean, the very best. And we have 2 colleagues from Australia and 1 colleague from the UK, 1 colleague from Canada as well. And then you will find right now 1 module that can be used in teacher education or in professional development. And we will be adding 1 more module a month. In fact, the 2nd module is already with the editors, and it should be posted in a couple of weeks. And you will find blogs and current events related to the education of English learners in secondary schools. We now have about 5 minutes for protests, comments, questions. So Monica, you are in charge of that.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. So one of the questions that came up actually a few times was people asking you to address the issue of an ESL teacher shortage, that we don't have enough boots on the ground to properly provide ELs with the instruction they need, their mandated units of study in New York.
Yes, to be honest, I started as an ENL teacher many decades ago, because I have been in education for over 5 decades. But I think that the most important work resides with general education teachers in the case of elementary school, and with subject matter teachers in secondary. Because unfortunately, in most ENL teacher preparation programs, there is still an antiquated model of teaching about language that falls into what Guadalupe Valdez, and now you want to watch the conversation with Guadalupe Valdez calls the curricularization of language. That is, we think that language is our curriculum. And even worse, we think that language develops sequentially from easier to increasingly more complex grammatical features. And when we curricularize language, then language doesn't really serve the purpose of communicating intellectually rigorous, enticing opportunities. Because how much can you say in the present tense, right? Instead, we need to think of how do we get students to have a different view of language that begins with understanding the purpose of things, and that continues by looking at what is then, if this is the purpose, if the purpose is to, for example, present an argumentation, then I need to understand what the argument is, and then I need to understand what are the warrants that are being brought to support that argument, so that I can think of how may I counteract if I don't believe in that, right? So you see, language teachers, ESL teachers, are at this moment they're not best prepared to engage in the shifts that we are proposing. They can do it, but they need to be prepared to leave behind antiquated ways of looking at language to embrace new ways of looking at language. I hope I don't disappoint you. I know many of you are ESL colleagues, and so am I. But my faith is, of course you can do it, and you would love looking at teaching language in different ways.
So Dr. Walqui, I believe an old friend of yours, John Balby, is here. Do you recall John Balby?
John, you haven't appeared on my screen. I'll go.
And he had a question for you. What advances are being made to kind of convert administrators to understanding everything that you're talking about, and get administrators on board?
That's a brilliant question, because leaders supposedly are leaders, but the understanding of leaders is that they personify the changes that they want others to follow, right? And so working with administrators is vital. And in my work, not in my 50%, which is a center, but in the rest of my life, one of my most important tasks is precisely to work with principals, to work with APs. Because if we convince them, and it's easy to convince anybody that education can be really exciting, that students will absolutely love what they're doing, and that teachers will feel once again like the intellectuals they once used to be. So that is what we want to do, and what we definitely need to do. Time-wise, I am really sorry. We are going to have to cut it off here, because Marian needs to run to another event, and so do I. It's been wonderful talking to you. I apologize for my mishaps with technology, but you see, that's what happens when you are a very old lady.
Oh, no. Dr. Aida Walqui, thank you so much for your presentation and for joining us today for New York State TESOL. We are so grateful for your time and your expertise. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who attended today. And I will be sending Dr. Walqi's presentation to you after this meeting is finished, so you can have those presentation PowerPoint slides to look at. And if anyone is in need of if anyone is seeking CTLE credit, I will also send the link for that. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Thank you.